Hey everyone, welcome back to Bryan's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. For some of you that have been following my channel for a while, some of this might be a review, but a lot of you had asked me to do a video on my scariest moments on trail, which happened all on the Pacific Crest Trail. And I want to say that this is no way meant to fearmonger. The Pacific Crest Trail is still my favorite trail out of all the trails I've ever hiked. There are still a lot of trails I want to hike, including the Continental Divide Trail. Before I get started with this video, I just wanted to say a little bit more about the shorts. I am going to do a few shorts on videos that I've already covered, only 3 or 4. This is because a lot of you have asked me to cover these cases, like the Dyatlov Pass incident, which I just did a short for, which I did a video for almost 3 years ago. It was censored by YouTube, I don't know why, but this didn't push it into anybody's feed. It's a video I researched for years, even before I started my channel. That's why I wanted to do the short, to bring attention to the fact that I had covered the case. I'll leave more information at the end of this video. It was early on in my creation of videos, so I know the audio isn't the best. The information is sound. I actually went to Russia, worked with Russian translators. I'll have a link to that video in the description if you're interested. Anyway, let's get started. So back in 2019, it was my first trip out west, as well as attempting the Pacific Crest Trail, which, for those of you that don't know, is a trail that goes all the way from the border of Mexico all the way up to Canada. It is roughly 2,650 miles long. The first 700 miles or so takes you through the southern deserts of California, but also several mountain regions, which can be misleading for a lot of hikers that think it's just going to be a flat hike. It's very mountainous. There are some very steep mountains that you have to overcome. This is me in Idlewild, California. Everything was going great on the hike. I had started out a little bit past the border, about 50 miles in, and I started late. I started in late May. These are all pictures I took myself during that trip. This is a picture of me taken just after Idlewild. I wanted to stop in the town of Cabazon, but none of my trail family that I was hiking with wanted to because it was so close, and I understood that. I just wanted to stop and see it because of the dinosaurs, which many of you may not be familiar with, but the Cabazon dinosaurs have been featured in many movies. These are some pictures I took. When I got there, I realized that there was only one hotel, which was actually a casino, which I got a room, but I still went over to see the dinosaurs, took some pictures. Here's me with one of the giant feet of the dinosaurs. I was having an absolute great time. The only hotel, as I said, is the Marengo Casino Tower in Cabazon, which I got a room at, which was probably the most expensive room I had on the whole trail. I kept hiking on, saw many blue barrel and red barrel cactuses, things I'd never seen in my life, and I'm sure those of you from the West Coast, you're used to all this, but us from the East, I'd never seen any of those things. Kept hiking on, made my way up through the desert to Cahoon Pass, eventually to Wrightwood, and then eventually to Hatchapee, which is generally considered one of the hardest sections of the trail because it is so hot and there's a lot of distance between water sources. I actually didn't mind it so much just because here where I live, we're just so used to not only heat but also humidity. I was fairly exhausted by the time I got to Hatchapee, so I decided to stay there for 2 days. Met up some other hikers that were passing through the area. Still had not seen my original trail family since we had departed from Idlewild. Picked up some of my resupply boxes and then was just planning my next movements, which was going to be from Hatchapee up to the town of Ridgecrest, which I'll have some various maps up. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I know some of this might be confusing. It's hard to kind of describe without actually showing you a series of maps. These are some pictures of Ridgecrest when I got there. It's very much a desert town like Hatchapee, but I actually enjoyed it. It was fine, no problems. There was basically one giant Walmart that I went to, resupplied, got back on trail, was planning on going from Ridgecrest to Kenedi Meadows, which is not actually that significant of a movement. It's just under 60 miles on the Pacific Crest Trail. Here is one of the exact campsites that I stayed at along this path, which I absolutely love because that big bush protected me from the wind, as that log did too. Got up, this is around Mount Jenkins, which I'll have another picture coming up. As you can see, it's just very mountainous. The one thing about the Pacific Crest Trail is it's graded for horses, so it's a little bit different than the Appalachian Trail. It doesn't just go up and over the mountains, it goes in what we call switchbacks. That being said, this particular part of the trail was very narrow, at least in my opinion. It was only shoulder width apart from basically a cliff of mountains on one side and a cliff going way down on another side. The first mistake I made right around this point was skipping one water source because it looked absolutely disgusting and I still had what I thought would be enough water. Right around this point, I was coming around a curve and I noticed that there was a huge log, a tree that had fallen across the trail. I started to climb over it, which all of a sudden I felt the earth shaking, which I'd never felt before. I thought maybe I had started a rock slide of some sort. I had no idea what was going on. Thankfully, one of the straps of my backpack caught onto one of the tree limbs, prevented me from falling over a cliff. One of the other tree limbs jammed into my side, which we'll talk about more. This turned out to be an earthquake, which the epicenter was Ridgecrest, which was not that far away. It was one of the biggest earthquakes in over 20 years. I managed to pull myself back up, get back on trail, and make it to the summit of this particular mileage, set up camp right here. At the time, I was carrying a very impractical tent. It's a tent made by Tarp Tent, which is still one of my favorite tents in the world, but it's for 3 people. I, at the time, thought I just wanted more space. It actually turned out that this was a great option because dome-style tents are much more resilient to wind, and there was just crazy, crazy wind that night. It was just unbelievable. I was very injured. I had blood on my face, all over me. I was down to less than half a liter of water. I hadn't seen anybody in days. I then heard this soft voice saying, "Hey, is anyone in there?" Again, I know some of you are familiar with my video, Meeting an Angel on the Pacific Crest Trail. I'll leave a link to that in the description. To summarize, this wonderful woman came up and she offered me some spare water. It just saved me. The next day I got up, hiked about a mile down, and we ended up hiking down to the next water source, which I'll never forget her words. She said, "Wow, you're certainly going to town on that water." I said, "I'll never make that mistake again." In any event, she went on. I eventually made my way down to Mantor Creek, which is pictured here. I eventually met up with her again. She went on. I stayed and camped there for the night. Right as I was getting settled, I heard this huge boom of thunder, which didn't make sense because it was a clear blue sky. It was an aftershock, which was even worse than the first earthquake. Thankfully, I was in an area with no rocks or boulders, basically a flat terrain. I was okay, but it was still scary because it lasted for almost 5 minutes. The next day, I mustered up all the energy I could, hiked my heart out. This is a picture of the 700-mile mark that some other hikers had placed some rocks at. I finally was able to make it to Kenedi Meadows, and unlike in the movies, like the one with Reese Witherspoon, there was no applause or anything like that. Instead, my entrance to Kenedi Meadows was met with, "Are you kidding me? Did you just come out of that with all those rocks falling and everything?" I said, "Yes, in fact, I did." The people that were there were absolutely wonderful. There was this one woman that came up to me. She was one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my entire life. She said that she could drive me up to the next town. I said, "No, I'll just keep on hiking." I don't know why I did that, especially because of all the pain I was in. I managed to keep hiking up to the next waypoint, and I made it up into Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. At this year, there was a ton of snow in the Sierra Mountains. In fact, in Mammoth Lakes, they were skiing until late August. I did eventually skip a few sections and made my way into South Lake Tahoe, where I saw a doctor, where I realized I had several broken ribs and a concussion. At this point, I stayed there for a few more days, explored South Lake Tahoe, which became one of my favorite places in the entire world. It is absolutely beautiful. If you've never been to South Lake Tahoe, I highly recommend it. It is one of the emeralds, or whatever you want to call it, of America. I then caught a flight home and went back to my regular life, being disappointed that I had failed at my attempt to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. The injuries and everything withstanding, I had high hopes to come back the next year and try it again, which I eventually did. Unfortunately, we were all hit with COVID in 2020. However, I was actually working and I needed to go out west for my regular work job anyway. So I got a pass and figured, why not try and be in the wilderness away from people. I caught a flight, which was pretty much one of the best flights I've ever taken. There was literally maybe 25 people on a plane that could hold 200 plus people. The plane was immaculate. I had the whole row to myself. This is a picture of me leaving National Airport in Washington, D.C. On my way, I had many connections, eventually ending up in Reno, Nevada, where I was going to then catch a Uber or some kind of transportation down to South Lake Tahoe, where I was going to start my next journey on the Pacific Crest Trail, starting at Echo Summit, which is pictured on this map. I started out in early May, made my way up to Lake Aloha, which is a very popular camping spot for weekenders as well as thru hikers. These are pictures of Lake Aloha. I actually ended up covering a missing hiker case during that time. The weather was very cool. There was still a lot of snow on the ground, but not so much. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't like I needed my ice axe or anything, so I just proceeded on. This is a picture of when I was leaving Lake Aloha. The next pass I was facing was Dick's Pass, which is considered to be an easy pass. It's not that high, it's not that difficult. Unfortunately though, this year, the weather said that everything was clear. On the south side of the pass, everything was clear. There was no snow. This is a picture of what it looked like on the south side. When I got to the north side and looked out over the summit, I was just absolutely scared to death because it was miles and miles of at least 3+ feet of snow. There was no footprints. It was very early on in the season. I was not prepared, and I'm willing to admit I made a lot of mistakes here. I wasn't carrying my ice axe or micro spikes. I had my SATCOM device and trekking poles, but as we all know, the PCT goes in switchbacks. It was just an absolute nightmare, and at one point I lost everything and just started sliding. I thought that was the end. I was sliding for probably 100 feet until I was able to thankfully self-arrest with one of my trekking poles. I hit various rocks and snowbanks and all kinds of things on my slide down. I was thankfully eventually able to make my way down to Dick's Lake, where I set up camp. The weekenders that were camping there said to me, "There's no way you just came out of that pass." I said, "Yeah, I did. It was not easy, but I managed to make it down." They offered to give me a ride out. Again, I declined. Instead, I looked at my map and I saw that there was a trail called the Eagle Creek Trail or Eagle Falls Trail that would take me back to this place called Emerald Bay, which is a beautiful area of Lake Tahoe. That was my plan, which is what I did. At the time, I didn't know this, but I had several broken ribs, a concussion. I was very beat up. I was so fortunate to meet these 2 day hikers that saw me sitting on a rock. They offered to take me back to South Lake Tahoe to the hospital. I was so grateful, and if they're listening, I just thank you again for doing that for me. This is a couple days after I got out of the hospital. Of course, I'm smiling because I try and make the best of everything. Broken ribs, there's really not much you can do but wrap them, but it is very painful with things just as something simple as breathing. So it was a rough go. Sliding down that icy mountain tore through all my layers and gave me the similar symptoms to road rash. One of the other scariest times I had was when I was camping outside of Lassen Volcanic National Park. I woke up to this, which is a paw print of a full-grown mountain lion. In fact, the paw prints looked like they had been circling my tent. When I got up, I packed up my stuff, but for the next mile or two, I just felt like there was something watching me. I kept looking back, maybe it was just my imagination. That was until I came around a bend and saw this staring directly at me from about 50 feet away. This isn't the actual mountain line because I didn't obviously have time to stop and take a picture. I was more frightened on what I was going to do, but I kept my wits about me and just stood my ground, kept eye contact with the mountain lion, put my arms up high, made a lot of noise. Thankfully, the mountain lion decided that she wasn't interested and she just made her way back into the forest. But I will say that was one of the most terrifying moments I had on trail. Like I said, it is always good if you do encounter a mountain lion, you never want to break eye contact. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. I've sustained various minor injuries over my years of hiking and volunteering on various cases. I will say this, it's all been worth it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think being in the outdoors, also working with search and rescue and various families to try and help bring back their loved ones is a very, very positive thing. And if any of you are interested, please leave me a comment or send me an email, which of course I'll have in the description. These are just some pictures of South Lake Tahoe and some of my favorite places that I have stayed over the years. I also just wanted to say that even though I went through these experiences, it led me to meet several people like Trey Warner, who is the president of a nonprofit organization in the state of Washington, pictured here, who runs a search and rescue group. This is him wearing a helmet made by MSA that I donated to him a few years back. I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching. Although 2 of these experiences nearly killed me, at the same time, I learned a lot and gained more experience and was able to help other people throughout those summers. If any of you are planning a thru hike or any type of hike, especially a solo hike, I highly recommend you carrying some kind of satellite device, especially one that gives you up-to-date weather. That is an amazing feature. If you guys have any questions for me about gear or any other things, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm always happy to give advice or answer any of your questions. I'm always here for you. I want to say thank you all for watching. I really appreciate all your support, your feedback, your comments. It just means the world to me. If you have any case suggestions, I'll have my email in the description as always. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me to the end. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the shorts. In general, the shorts that I'll be making will be for previews for upcoming cases. There are a couple of cases that I'm going to do shorts for cases that I've covered, only 3 or 4. The reason being is because YouTube censored them for whatever reason. I can't figure out why, which only means they don't push it into people's feeds and something with the ads or whatever. In any event, there's been a few cases where people have asked me repeatedly to cover a case which I've already covered. That is the reason for my recent short on the Dyatlov Pass incident. I spent a lot of time researching and putting work into that case. Throughout the years, I've seen many videos which are very good and others that just totally blow all the information incorrectly. In any event, if you'd like to be entered into this month's coin giveaway, please just leave me a message saying that you would like to be entered with a comment of some sort, whether it's about a case suggestion or comment on this video or others, and I will enter you. Alright, see you next time.